This video covers a holiday that Ros and I took in Egypt in January 2024. Here's our route to Hurghada from Manchester. It's a 6-hour flight. Our first 5 days were spent in the resort of Hurghada, with the hotel sitting on the beach on the Red Sea. It was a relaxing few days in the sun prior to the hectic time we had later on the holiday. We made the short flight to Cairo for a 2-day stay. The Pyramids of Giza, just outside Cairo, is home to 3 impressive pyramids. The Great Pyramid is the largest Egyptian pyramid and held the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu. Built over 4,000 years ago and standing at almost 150 metres high, it was the tallest man-made structure in the world for more than 3,800 years, until Lincoln Cathedral was finished. You can also see the Sphinx in some of these photos. Really is a marvellous sight. You could go inside the pyramid to the burial chamber via a very narrow and steep passage. This was the hottest I got on the whole holiday. The short flight from Cairo to Luxor and boarded our boat, the Blue Shadow II. Whilst in Luxor, we visited the local sites in or close to the Valley of the Kings. After a period of being put into pyramids, the Egyptian capital moved to Luxor, and later pharaohs were buried in underground tombs, 62 of them in the Valley of the Kings. Most of these were robbed quite soon after burial, but one of the most famous one of Tutankhamun was not discovered until the 1920s. It was hidden below another tomb. It is believed there are still 2 undiscovered tombs. From outside there is not much to see, which was the intention, but inside is lavish wall art and hieroglyphs, which were only deciphered in the last 300 years after the Rosetta Stone was found. The wall art is over 3,000 years old and is marvellous. The mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut is a masterpiece of ancient architecture. Built around 1500 BC, it's on 3 levels and built into the cliffs behind it. The Colossi of Memnon are 2 massive stone statues of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, built in 1350 BC. After the day out, we got back on the boat and set sail, bound for Kom Ombo. Here's our boat, the Blue Shadow II. There were 70 boats of almost identical design on the Nile while we were there, but Egypt is suffering from a shortage of tourists, and in good times there were over 300 boats like this on the Nile at any time. The first shots of this magnificent river, long thought to be the longest in the world at just over 4,000 miles, the Amazon is now generally considered to be the longest, but this is a matter of ongoing debate and definition of where a river starts and ends. On this shot you can see the river and its two principal sources, the White Nile from Lake Victoria in Uganda and the Blue Nile from Lake Tana in Ethiopia. Sunset over the Nile. There's plenty of these pumping stations along the Nile. Virtually the whole population of Egypt lives within a few miles of the Nile, which provides water for irrigation and drinking. Beyond that, the country is almost all barren desert. The Temple of Kom Ombo, unique in Egypt for being dedicated to two sets of gods with two sets of courts, halls and sanctuaries. Built around 100 BC, the southern half is dedicated to the crocodile god Sobek, and the northern half is dedicated to Haroeris, the falcon god. Incidentally, there were crocodiles on this section of the Nile till the Aswan High Dam was built. There are beautiful wall decorations and hieroglyphic texts within the temple. We sailed to Aswan and visited a number of attractions near our boat, using small boats to reach some of them. The Botanical Gardens were started by Lord Kitchener immediately prior to the First World War. He was Consul General here and a keen gardener. This is the mortuary and villa of the Aga Khan III who lived here. His son was later a famous racehorse owner, including the Derby winner Shergar. This is the most famous hotel in Aswan, the Cataract Hotel. Famous guests have included Sir Nicholas II, Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Jimmy Carter, Princess Diana and Agatha Christie, who wrote her book Death on the Nile here. This is the Aswan Low Dam, built by the British and initially finished in 1902. This was the first major dam across the Nile, designed to reduce flooding in the lower Nile to support irrigation and population growth in Egypt. It wasn't high enough and was raised twice, but still did not prevent flooding, so eventually the high dam was built, which we'll see later. The Philae Temple was built on an island in the Nile, but funnily enough, not the island where it is now. The original island was flooded when the low dam was built, so the whole temple was dismantled and moved to another island nearby, which is permanently above the reservoir of the low dam. The temple was built in 600 BC and is the burial place of Osiris, husband of Isis and brother of Set. In the distance you can see steel posts where the original home of this temple is now submerged. Here we see Lake Nasser, which was created when the Aswan High Dam was built in the 1960s. This time the dam was high enough to fully control the Nile and prevent flooding in Lower Egypt. Lake Nasser is the largest man-made lake in the world, 340 miles long. The dam also provides around 10% of Egypt's electricity via a hydroelectric station. This happy situation is threatened by a new dam under construction on the Blue Nile in Ethiopia. This may cause a significant reduction in water flows to Egypt. The two countries have been in dispute about this for many years, and there have been threats of war and sabotage over it. However, the Ethiopian dam is now almost built, and if Egypt did sabotage their dam, it is reckoned that the surge of water would destroy the Aswan High Dam and most buildings in Egypt, and cause a tidal wave in the Mediterranean which would affect Italy. Here we see the Nile peacefully moving on from the high dam towards the low dam some miles downstream. Back to Luxor from Aswan, navigating the lock at Esna. This is a huge lock with 2 lanes, each capable of taking 2 of these large cruising boats. When it's busy you can wait for up to 12 hours to get through this, but we did it in an hour. On arrival at Luxor, we headed for the Karnak Temple, close to the centre of Luxor. Building started around 2000 BC and continued for over 1,000 years. The temple contains magnificent columns, impressive statues, obelisks and fantastic wall decoration. There are also dozens of sphinxes stretching in an avenue to the Luxor Temple, which we shall see later. The temple was also the setting for a scene in the Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me. Here you see my footage of the area, immediately followed by the same area in the Bond film. Luxor Temple is a short distance from Karnak and built around 1400 BC. By the way, while the ancient Egyptians were building all the fantastic buildings we've seen in this film, in Britain we were living in mud huts and running around in animal skins. We didn't build anything much above head height till thousands of years later. Pharaohs of Egypt were crowned here. Once again, the columns and the statues are fantastic. We returned home from Luxor to Hurghada via minibus across the barren desert, and then a direct flight from Hurghada back to Manchester. Overall, fantastic holiday, some marvellous sights, lovely weather, great people.